So today, inshallah ta'ala, I'm sitting with a panel of active members in the Islamic community in the Essex County, Union County areas. And inshallah ta'ala, we want to talk about some of the solutions to the problems that we are experiencing in our communities. Problems relating to Muslims not maturing spiritually to learn how to deal with one another despite our differences. Problems relating to the economic disparities that keeps the masjids, keep the Muslim communities constantly begging the community members for money. You would be hard pressed to go to a community that doesn't ask you for anything. Every Jumu'ah that we attend, there's always a bombardment of solicitation for money, and quite naturally, it begins to take a toll on the community. And to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result is insanity. So we want to look at this problem or this dilemma from a solution-oriented perspective. How do we heal? Typically, when people go through traumatic situations, there's a healing process that they have to go through in order to come out of that stage of their lives. And I mean, just taking it a step back for a moment, as an African-American Muslim, looking at our experiences here in America, being free from slavery, we were just told that you're free to go. But that was trauma that we went through for hundreds of years that we've never properly healed from. When a person is in a car accident, they have to go through therapy in order, not just physical therapy, but even mental therapy, psychological therapy, because it was a traumatic situation and it takes a toll on the mental as well as the physical. So when you look at our communities, every transition that we go through, there's no healing process. We just transition from one phase or one stage of Islam to the next, and we never go through a healing process. So inshallah ta'ala, today, these are some of the things that we're going to talk about. And I'll start with the first question, and I'll let my guests introduce themselves as they tackle the question. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, first and foremost. I want to thank you guys for coming on the show and participating in this discussion, and hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, we can come out of this discussion with some solutions to this problem. Let me just start by saying the transitions that we've gone through as a community, how has it impacted our social interaction with one another, and how do we begin to heal that interaction? Because I mean, you have Muslims that'll walk right past you and not even give you the salams. You have Muslims that will walk right past you and not even wish peace on you. You have Muslims who grew up with one another, who have spent time in jail with one another, who've done business with one another, and then soon as a wave come through our communities, it's as if they become complete strangers, as if they don't even know one another anymore. What is your experience with this, and what do you think is the solution to this problem? Let's start with you, Brother Mustafa. Thank you, Mike.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
My name is Shakur Mustafa, and I'm affiliated with the community Masjid al-Yamin, which is located on 4th Avenue in East Orange, where Imam Abdul Aziz is the Imam. My background in the Islamic community, I'm a retired police detective. And I think there's a number of points that I think, but to keep it short and get right to the point, one of the brothers that Imam Shadid Muhammad had asked to come here, he said something, and this thought is not my thought, but I agree with it, but it's his thought. Imam Abu Mu'tazim said, one of the things that we haven't done is we haven't learned to love one another. And I think that loving and forgiving each other is so important. I know that some of the things that I've experienced in the transition of development that has made me bitter with some of the brothers, I've learned by Allah's grace through being married with a very humble woman that forgiving is the key. It's one of the major keys that all of us have to learn about each other. We have to learn to take those minor things and make them minor, instead of allowing those things to become major. That to the degree that I don't like somebody because he didn't give me salam. No, this is a growth and it's a transition that if I can forgive somebody, I'm sure that Allah can forgive me. And I think that that's a very important ingredient.
That's an excellent point. And so let's start there. Let's start with the love piece. Because before we can begin to love other people, you have to learn how to love yourself first. And I think that's where part of our problem stems from. Many of us have grown up in homes where people have never told us they loved us. My father is 60 years old, and when I brought this to his attention, my father told me at 60 years old today that my father never told me, I love you. This is my father telling me this. 60 years old, he said, my father never told me I love you. And the ironic thing about that is that my father never told me I love you. So when he said that to me, I told him to stand up. And I embraced him and I looked him in his face and I told him, I love you. We're going to break the cycle right now. Because that's not going to be passed on to another generation. Another generation of black men that don't understand what love is. Because they haven't learned how to love themselves and embrace themselves first and foremost. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "La yu'minu ahadukum hatta yuhibba li akhihi ma yuhibbu li nafsi." That none of you truly believe until you love for your brothers what you love for yourself. But you can't love for me what you love for yourself when you don't love yourself. If you don't love you, how you gonna love for me what you love for you? And you don't love you. So we're at a disadvantage when it comes to implementing hadith like this because we don't understand the proper context of love. We associate love with, familiarity. You look like me, so I love you. And you'll find this a lot with the sisters, those that wear niqab. The sisters that wear niqab, they have an affinity to other sisters who wear niqab, and they'll dismiss the sisters who don't wear niqab because they're dealing with familiarity. They see another sister with niqab on, they go straight to her because there's a familiarity between them. And that's what we associate love based upon. We go to the same masjid, so I love you. You got a beard, I got a beard, so I love you. You wear thobe, I wear thobe, so I love you. And our association with love is very superficial. But love in Islam is deeper than that. So I'll go on to my next guest, inshallah ta'ala. Introduce yourself and tackle the topic, inshallah ta'ala.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Raj Al-Ajri. I'm from Plainfield Center of Islamic Enlightenment, Plainfield, in Union County. I am a businessman. I'm the president of the masjid. I am a businessman there. I think the solution starts today. I see, alhamdulillah, a lot of gathering here. I see a lot of the brothers, which is, as you said, they love the others more than they love themselves. The brothers, the one they've been working very hard for today to make this day happen, I think they show the love to all of us. If we could do just part of what they're doing, I think this is the solution. If we start, as you said, to love the others, which is we see it today, alhamdulillah, this is the beginning of the solution. And we don't have to be selfish. If we start really care about the other and don't just say me, I think this is the beginning of the solution.
MashaAllah. Okay, so we had Brother Mustafa mention our starting process to the healing process. Our starting point to the healing process is learning how to forgive people. Forgiveness is about you, not the other person. When you forgive somebody, it's not about the other person getting away with it or getting it off on you, right? Because we tend to hold on to resentment because that's the only validation of our feelings that we have. We figure if I hate you, then my feelings, as long as I hate you, my feelings are valid. Because the moment that I forgive you, then that almost means like my feelings are invalid. But what about my feelings? Right? So starting with learning how to forgive people, and then learning how to love one another and being more concerned about other people. My next guest, inshallah ta'ala, Brother Yusuf.
I think that there is some type of void in the community, and some inactivity in the community, and not enough services within the community to create that love between one another.
Services like what? Give us some examples.
For example, we have a lot of idle time. Most of the time that we interact with each other is, just for the salah, right? And then, we may have a sidewalk discussion or a discussion on the masjid floor. However, when there are services provided, to the community, like youth activities, then, the youth will gravitate towards you and love you because of what you're doing for them. Another thing that we have a lot of social problems that are going on in the community, people that may need some social welfare, people that may need some counseling, right? And if you create these type of programs and institutions, in the community, then that gives that person a reason to love you, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that aids his servant, that aids one another. So when I help you with a financial crisis, or when I help you with your marriage, or when I help you with your children, you're going to love me for that. I appreciate what you did for me, right? And this will cause you to gravitate towards me. So we have a lot of idle time, right? And once we become a little bit more active as community members, then I think that love will increase in child.
So that's a good point, Brother Yusuf. And that is increasing the activity in the community. Activities that will create environments where we will learn how to love one another, that social interaction. As some of the scholars, they say, al-insan madaniyun bil-tab', that the human being is a social creature by nature. And this isolation of stay away from this one and stay away from that one and don't talk to this one and don't talk to that one, that is not even humanly possible. We are actually commanding one another to do things that go against our fitrah, that go against our natural state, which is to interact with people. And being Muslim minorities here in America, you would think that we would try to encourage more social interaction as opposed to creating, or fragmenting the community and, these group of brothers over here and these group of brothers over here. And these group of brothers getting mad because this one established a masjid and that one established this, and these are the things that are, literally tearing our community up. So we'll go to our next guest, inshallah ta'ala, Brother Hassan.
Yes, my name is Hassan Abdullah. I'm in a position of trust to the Masajid Show of Essex County, and I'm also in a position of trust to God Islam. And I think the key is, number one, that we can't make assumptions that because we look alike that we're all the same. Our background in Elizabeth is a little different than most. Alhamdulillah, to Haji Sham Jabber, we grew up with the Sunnah from the inception. We have 23 families, and our leadership is only as good as our community. We work together, we trust each other, we love each other. And I think the basis for us, we've always been international. When I was 8 years old, 9 years old, our community was international. Even when the struggle was going on in the 60s and people faced segregation, we had Muslims from the international community constantly in our masjids in Elizabeth. We weren't taught black and white, we were taught Islam. And because of that, we developed a trust for one another and a trust for others. And we don't let our differences be based on our complexion, which none of us have chosen. Because I'm sure if I had my choice, it may not be a little dark. So we didn't choose our complexion, we didn't choose our parents. Some of us chose to practice Islam. So what I'm saying is that I think the first level is that, one, in any relationship, no matter what it is, it begins with a foundation of trust. And as Muslims, we should always give a Muslim the presumption of trust. If we can't presume that a Muslim is trustworthy, then something is either wrong with his Islam or our Islam. The greatest thing that the Prophet Muhammad gives for ourselves is bring us together through love. He joined our hearts. And part of that is because the Sahaba and the people around him trusted him. Trusted him before his prophethood and trusted him after his prophethood.
MashaAllah. Hence his nickname, Al-Amin, trustworthy. Right? Tayyib, inshallah. Good point. And our next guest, Imam Ali Jabir. تفضل.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My view is very clear. When Islam is introduced somewhere, the first thing that it deals with is the restoration of the family. In order for us to develop love from its very roots, develop love from a genuine standpoint, we must restore the families. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ. He says, all you who believe, save yourselves first, and then your families from the fire, because its fuel will be men and stone. If we don't restore the family, if we don't protect the wives and children, we will raise this to the next generation. We will be the last generation of Muslims in America. So restoration of the family restores those several things such as love and compassion, mercy, forgiveness. These things are understood clearly when you have a family. You heard the old statement, blood is thicker than water. Well, in this case, Islam extended that. We're an entire global family. So we have to restore that. We're one ummah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us one ummah, and we don't make any distinction between our Anbiya and Mursaleen, prophets and messengers, and we don't make no distinction between Muslims. As the brother says, you don't truly believe until you want for yourself, want for your brother what you want for yourself. And that's basically my view.
Well, you open up a whole other can of worms when you start talking about the family structure, because I think as African American Muslims we've come into Islam, and we came into Islam with a ton of family issues, social ills, and then we took the religion of Al-Islam instead of curing those problems, and we just threw a blanket over those problems and created more problems. We're talking about issues like domestic violence in the Islamic community that is never addressed. As long as I have been a Muslim, walillahi alhamd, I've been Muslim almost 17 years of my life. I have never once heard a conference or an Islamic lecture regarding domestic violence. I've never heard a 3-day conference about domestic violence, and every single one of us as imams and administrators of Masajid, we know brothers in our communities that are abusing their women. But we never talk about it. We never talk about it. We constantly keep people's minds focused on Tawheed, Tawheed, Tawheed. When you find that the Prophet ﷺ, he never dismissed the social ills in his community. Never dismissed the social ills in his community. He came up with a dual diagnosis, if I could use that term. And that was, he dealt with the belief aspect, the spiritual aspect, and he dealt with the social aspect. Today we want to baffle you with the spiritual aspect, and we never get around to the social aspect. Never once have I heard a 3-day conference on domestic violence from the Qur'an and from the Sunnah, from the methodology of the Salaf. Never once. And we all know brothers in our communities that abuse their women. We all know children in our community who have fathers and stepfathers in the community. I mean, it's to the point where sisters are passed around in the community, right? Almost like a disease. From one brother, I mean, you may have a sister, and this is no disrespect to the sister, but you may have sisters in the community that have been married by 4 or 5 different brothers in the community, have 3, 4, 5 children by 3, 4 different brothers in the same community. That should speak volumes to what we are doing wrong as a community, as a ummah. That is dysfunctional. There's nothing right about that and everything wrong about that. So when you start talking about the family issue, the family structure, when you look at the Prophet ﷺ and his family life, because we don't shed a lot of light on that. We shed a light on how the Prophet ﷺ taught the Sahaba Aqidah. But we never shed light on how the Prophet ﷺ was with his wives and his children. How was he with his wives and his children? So much so that they carried that legacy even after his death. When you look at his relationship between him and Fatima, Fatima was just like her father. They said when you saw Fatima walking, she walked just like the Prophet ﷺ. Her walk, her demeanor was just as her father's. When Fatima entered into a room and the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with his companions, he would stop talking, stand up, kiss her forehead, and let her sit down where he was sitting. Do we do that to our daughters? And then we'll yell from the rooftops that we're on the Sunnah. We'll yell from the rooftops that we're on the Sunnah. But we dismiss this social aspect of raising families and family structure. So let's talk about that, since we're on that topic, Brother Hassan.
Well, I guess because our community is probably the least knowledgeable of all communities, I can honestly say we don't have a domestic violence problem.
As an ummah, we do.
As an ummah, but
as an ummah, we do.
I think that a lot of it, growing up, we saw little domestic violence, but personally, I think that because people think they know more, they become more abusive. Because now their abuse is based on how much they know, and because they just good Muslim, so they're using Islam as a premise for their abuse. They're not Muslims. I mean, I had a situation where a brother basically essentially was charged with domestic violence. And
you're an attorney, right?
I'm an attorney. And after I spoke to his wife, I went back to the brother and said, listen, brother, you had a good wife. You had a good wife. But in talking to all of them, it wasn't even a brother. It was his knowledgeable friends.
Okay.
One of whom said to me, when I gave him an answer to the question that I don't want to get into, he said to me, brother, only a scholar is qualified to answer that question. I said, you in the courtroom? He said, yeah. I said, you have a law degree? He said, no. I said, did you pass the bar? He said, no. I said, are you a lawyer? He said, no. I said, I'm the scholar.
MashaAllah.
So I think that what has happened is that people have used Islam. If you're abusive, you're abusive. And if you don't love yourself, you shouldn't get married.
Good point. If you don't love yourself, then you shouldn't get married. That's the gauge. And I tell brothers and sisters all the time, how do you know when you're ready to get married? Look at yourself in the mirror. If you are happy with the image that comes back to you, if you are at a good place in your life where you feel comfortable with who you are, then you can invite other people into your life because you have nothing but love to share. But if you look at yourself in the mirror and you are dissatisfied, right, with the image that comes back to you, don't invite nobody into your life like that. Don't bring anybody else into your life. If you're unsatisfied with who you are, how in the world can you believe that somebody else is going to be satisfied with who you are? And we have some, I guess those are some sisters or brothers over there applauding. They say when you throw a rock in the crowd, the first dog that barked was the one that got hit. Right? Yes, Brother Mustafa.
Not to stray away from the point of the family, but I think that another thing that plagues our development as a community, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Qur'an, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ. He said that we would never ever obtain that thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us, which is to be righteous, until we learn to spend out of that which we love.
And you're talking about finances, or you're talking about
economics?
Love?
I'm talking about economics here. Here, the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that you cannot achieve. You look at some of the other communities, you go there, people raising $100,000 in a night. We can't raise $100,000. Why? Because we've already given it to the cable company. We've already given it to the videos that we buy. Those things that plague us. There was recently a conference on all of the black leaders in America. And one of the things that they talked about, they said, look, our community, the African American community, is plagued by the fact that we don't spend our dollars with power. And by virtue of us not spending our dollars with power, nobody needs to come to us. They come and they exploit us.
Absolutely.
Because we don't harness any power.
Absolutely.
From our economics. That's a major point about our development. Nobody needs to listen to us. Nobody needs to cater to us. Nobody needs to ask us anything.
Well, to take it a step further, we're still debating on whether going to college is permissible or not. And I mean, to be honest with you, there's very few people who have become successful without going to school and getting a proper education. Very few people. But at the end of the day, if we're still debating 20 years into quote-unquote Qur'an and Sunnah or Salafiyya or whatever term you want to use, if we 20 years into that and we're still debating over whether or not going to college is something that is permissible or admissible, then what are we doing? I mean, what do you expect us to do? Work at Walmart for the rest of our lives? Because going to college is haram? And at the end of the day, while we buy into that, college is haram, African-American Muslims, while we buy into that, every other community is going to college. We have scholars who send their children to America from Saudi Arabia to go to college and to come back and to establish the economic system in their country. To take their rightful place as the future leaders of their society, while we here, right here in America, still debating over whether or not going to college is permissible or not. And so when we start talking about having an economic base or having, economic stability in our communities, I think that the starting point for that is education. I think I got that from you, Brother Hassan. It's non-negotiable. You don't have to like me. That's cool. Because I understand why you don't like me. Because you don't like me because you don't like you. And I'm okay with that. I understand your issue, your dilemma. When you look at me, I'm a reflection of you and you hate you, so you automatically hate me. Or the other issue, and that is your success is my failure.